President Barlas, officers of Pacific Institute, learned scholars and scientists, religious leaders, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great privilege to be here at this Pacifica Institute event. You may not know from the introduction, but in my day job as Provost of Claremont Lincoln University, my task has been to build partnerships with like-minded organizations in Southern California, United States, and around the world. And early on, we recognized that an organization living in our own backyard, that is, working out of Southern California, shared a mission very similar to Claremont Lincoln University. So for several years now, we've been in discussion and soon hope to announce a formal partnership between my university, an interreligious university, with member organizations, member religions that include Muslims, Jews, Christians, Jains, soon announcements of Hindus and Buddhists, indigenous traditions, and others. So my day job is to build partnerships. The mission of Pacifica is to build partnerships across the faith traditions for the good of the planet, humanity, and all things on it. So I want to dedicate this talk to the shared partnership that we're working on and soon will be announced. Thanks for coming. I have to say that I spent many years after receiving a brainy Yale PhD writing brainy books that few people could understand. And that was fine in the early parts of my career, but gradually I realized that the planet actually needed something more from professors, from the academy, from the university, than books that even their wives or husbands don't understand. My partner has never understood a single book I've written, and she stopped trying about some years ago. I underwent a conversion to try to find a way to take the knowledge I have of my religious tradition, of the other Abrahamic traditions, and the world religious traditions, and bring them into a productive partnership, especially with the contemporary sciences, and in light of the urgent global issues of our day. The task for us, I think, is to recognize this partnership, and then to get the power to the ground to actually do something with it. Abstract theoretical discussions are a luxury that we can no longer afford. We need to be able to take the science that we know, the religious interpretations and motivations, and bring them together into an active partnership, which I call prophetic activism. I should say that it was a couple of years ago at the World Parliament of Religions, I had the chance to bring, that's the largest gathering of religious leaders in the world at any given time. We had 8,000, 9,000 people in Melbourne, Australia. Were any of you there? I see some heads nodding. Fantastic. I'm sure I saw you. 8,000. It was an amazing thing. I mean, the Buddhists spontaneously set up a big display in the lobby of this huge convention center and started doing Buddhist rituals without any permission or warning. And everyone thought it was wonderful. Right? It was just an amazing collection. So we had 3 sessions on science and spirituality. And over the course of the day that these went on, had 600 people talk about ways that, say, the opening talk from a Nobel Prize-winning scientist, the talks from many religious leaders from around the world, how could they actually come together to do some sort of partnership? And it's that spirit, the spirit of that event, that launches today's talk. The mic here that I think is recording for the press, and I shouldn't move it, is that correct? Right? This microphone, it's right? Okay. I think if I put it on the floor, somebody would be unhappy. So I'll just move my notes around it. The topic that I want to choose today is the environmental situation. Why? Because here, in my opinion, is the example where the scientific facts so clearly are not motivating human beings to sufficient action. And the religious traditions, today I'll speak only of the Abrahamic traditions of Islam, of Judaism, and of Christianity, so clearly motivate us to take care of the world. as this sacred earth created by God. It seems to me that if that is a natural partnership, and if we could get the power of that partnership, I mean, we, those of us who are members of the Abrahamic traditions, and in partnership with all the global traditions, in fact, all who think of themselves or who as spiritual or who value spiritual practices and beliefs, if we could make this partnership work, we would make an impact on global problems. And that's the vision I want to get across in what I'm told should be 30 minutes. So I'm going to move a little bit quickly. What I want to do is just to give you a little bit of a sense of some of the major environmental issues and some of the things that we can do. And then I'm going to switch to the resources of the religious traditions. You know that climate change is probably the most urgent issue that we have to do. Dave Dolan is in the audience. He works with 350.org, Bill McKibben's group. Just wave your hand, Dave, so they can. And if you haven't visited 350.org and seen the work of Bill McKibben, you've missed something really important. So I want to make sure that I mention that here at the beginning. Let's talk then about some of the effects of global climate change, just as a reminder so that you'll know the issues that are there. Animals that have already become extinct include the golden toad and the harlequin frog of Costa Rica. These animals have disappeared as a direct result of global climate change. We have also brought about irreversible changes to ecosystems and animals. As the climate changes, the environmental niche that animals have adapted to for thousands and thousands of years, in some cases millions of years, the niche disappears. And because ecosystems are delicately balanced, it's not always possible for the animals to readapt. That's where the extinction comes from. This is Mount Schrammkogel in Austria, where the researchers are finding the change in temperature and air and liquid in these ecosystems is so radical that the species adapted to this world can no longer survive in those places. Another example that I want to mention is the nesting place for Adelie penguins in the Anvers Island off Antarctica. Since the 1970s, half of the nesting pairs have been lost. So in just a few short decades, the numbers here have been cut by 50%. We see some of that when we look at the difference in the glaciers. Compare this photo of the Portage Glacier from 1914 to this photo from 2005. We're looking at exactly the same spot. You can see it from the landmass, right? Look at the difference in the loss of the glaciers. You know the glaciers hold the largest collections of fresh water on our planet. And the fear about the loss of fresh water is really one of the most urgent issues that we face. It also has to do with the timing of the seasons. Spring comes earlier in the Arctic, in Antarctica now, which changes the mating seasons, the feeding seasons for the various animals. You know that 11 of the last 12 years in the Antarctica rank as the warmest since record keeping began in 1850. That, you understand, in, what would that be, 1950, 150, 62 years. In 162 years, 11 of the hottest years have taken place in the last 12 years, namely since the year 2000. Do you understand? That shows a remarkable trend. I want you to see, though, what this means for human persons. Here's a Bangladeshi village in 2005. As the water levels rise, 10% of the land mass of Bangladesh will go underwater. And that's from a rise of just 1 meter, 3.2 feet. This is the village on Bohai Island. We expect that will displace some 20 million people in Bangladesh alone. The change in the seasons causes variations for the animals. The period during which young birds, in this case the swamp sparrow in the United States, have worms or insects available for food is changed, which changes their ability to enter into the mating season and to feed the young when they're born. The ecosystems are delicately balanced so that the newborn chicks have their need of highest food source at the same time that the greatest number of worms and insects are available for the parents to catch. If that changes by even 2 weeks in some cases, the chicks can't get sufficient food to grow to maturity. Extreme weather is something you're fully familiar with. This is the heat wave in Chicago in 1995 that killed 700 people. There was a hot spell in Europe that would killed an estimated 20,000 people, greater Europe, including Turkey, in 2003. And this will become more common as the globe warms. This, for me, is a frightening picture. These are the children of Tuvalu, which is an island nation in the South Pacific, just 16.5 feet at its highest point above the ocean. As the water level rises, they spend more and more of each day sitting on their platforms, the kapapa platform there, waiting for the water to go down so that they can play. These are direct and present impacts of the climate change that we have launched. You know the effects of drought, especially on people in the global south where there isn't the economic security blanket that we have. This is Guangdong province in China during the major drought there. In general, the water crisis is one of the most urgent crises because its effects are felt most quickly. Drought kills the quickest. Think of these facts. Less than 1% of the world's water is readily available for direct human usage. 1/3 of the world's population lives in countries that are experiencing already moderate to high water stress. Floods and droughts claim lives and cripple economies. We estimate that by the year 2025, 2/3 of the world's population could be facing serious problems with water availability. This is a picture of something that I actually saw in person when I was in Mumbai not long ago. Children play in these heavily polluted rivers, drainage pipes that come out from pure sewage from the slums of Bombay that drains directly into the ocean. And this is the playground for the children in these areas. This is a picture of the Aral Sea, the 4th largest lake in the world, which has shrunk, as you can see here, to less than half of its size and has become now as salty as the ocean. The Bohai Sea in China is another example. It absorbs huge amounts of sewage. For example, in 2006, 80% of the discharge outlets from these major cities sent chemicals, industrial waste, and sewage directly into the sea. The fish are dying. There's a massive algal bloom with the so-called red tide, which comes as a result. And yet more factories, more harbor facilities are built. And here are children fishing in the Bohai Sea. This is where the families get their nutrition from. Without those fish, they don't survive. And yet this is one of the most polluted inner areas. You know a lot about carbon emissions. Mexico City is one of the countries in the world that has the most deadly pollution levels, but we know in Los Angeles that we frequently make our own atmosphere so thick with pollutants that to breathe it, especially to exercise in it, is dangerous. The stories about population growth obviously have much to do with these particular levels. Just consider this march of growth in population. 1830, 1 billion. That took from the beginning of this planet to 1830 to reach 1 billion. But by 1930, in 100 years, 2 billion. 30 years, 3 billion. 15 years, 4 billion. 12 years, 5 billion. Now more than 6.5 billion people, expected to reach 9.2 billion people by 2050. Current rate, 80 million people per year added to the population of the Earth. It's this asymptotic curve, which was flat and then becomes virtually vertical, that lies at the root of the climate change, the extinctions, and the other situations that I've been describing in this talk. What's interesting is that from the standpoint of science, it is not difficult to describe the sort of solutions that we can take from major to minor. And I run through them almost, tongue-in-cheek, because we are so familiar with what can be done to address the issues. The use of wind power and other renewable resources. Sustainable development. Did you know that close to 50% of the energy consumed in the United States is for buildings and especially for single-family dwellings? A huge amount of energy leaks daily out of our homes through the heat that we put in or the air conditioning that we put in to those buildings, the way that we build them. There are programs available. If you've walked on the streets of Paris, you've seen these bicycles. You slide your credit card in, you have the use of the bicycle. When you click it back into another stand, it stops the timer, and at the end of the month you have a, whatever, 8, 10 euro bill for the bicycle use that you've used. Not necessary in a big city, most big cities in the world, to be traveling around by car. We're in Los Angeles still not building cities that we can that have a center and homes close to them, so that we can travel in a sustainable way from our work to our home to our shopping to our entertainment. We still stretch things out in the scale of tens or even hundreds of miles. Simple things, changing light bulbs, hanging dry clothes. I could give you the statistics on what Americans spend in energy to dry their own clothes. If you come from another country, Turkey, I lived in Europe for many years, you realize almost nobody dries clothes in a machine. That's why God invented the sun, after all. Little things, paying bills online, recycling plastic bags. In short, consuming less, sharing more, and living more simply. That part, ladies and gentlemen, is not complicated. Why then are we having such difficulty on this planet? Is it happening? Are we responding to the facts of the change of the climate of our planet and to the clear list of solutions that people do? Is this data, the sort of facts I presented, I presented them in, 15 minutes, because it struck me that you know already most of the details, don't you? I mean, I could give more scientific data, but I realize after a while, it's not making any difference. It's not enough. Our brains, our prefrontal cortex, our science side seems not to be enough to motivate human beings to do something different. So we go on living in a world of incredible difference. This car, what is it, 6 miles a gallon or something like that? Or is it 6 gallons a mile? I'm not sure. And you know how many miles a gallon this one gets, right? Come on, everyone knows this. 37, yeah, but no, that's with the what did they advertise? Oh, it actually gets 37, whatever. 49, the famous number. We're California 49ers, right? That's why we drive the Prius, right? But I mean, look at that contrast. And yet we see so many of these. I saw somebody driving up the botanical gardens today in their Hummer. I thought, so you're going to hang out in the beautiful forest, but it's going to take you, 3 gallons to get here, right? We still build huge mansions to live in. In fact, this area of Los Angeles is famous for its exorbitance, right? You begin to wonder at some point, what's it going to take? I love this one. Where was that bump? Is it happening? If it's not happening, why not? And what role can, or indeed must, religious traditions play? What in our own traditions allow us, and I'm speaking now out of the Abrahamic traditions of Islam, of Judaism, and Christianity, what role might they allow us to play? Now, it would be very easy for me as a Christian theologian to come and to make the case from the Christian religion. But I've taken on the discipline, as I speak around the United States, to speak of religious traditions other than my own. Because I've discovered that if I can learn the powerful motivations for taking care of the planet out of other traditions, that it makes me realize that this is a partnership between multiple traditions, that it's not just one single belief system, but that we have allies around the world. That the beliefs that we may learn and practice can go hand in hand with the beliefs of other traditions as well. I also find, sadly, that North Americans have not understood the power and the grandeur of Holy Quran. And for me to speak of their Bible is too easy. But for me to bring passages from the Prophet helps them to understand a beautiful ally whom they often have not acknowledged. And though you as an audience may know somewhat more of Islam than most of the audiences I speak to, I wish to present this anyway as a reminder that it's the partnership of the ways that God has revealed God's self in different traditions that make this inter-religious partners really work. And the fact that I work at an inter-religious university, which is dedicated to these partnerships, to educating people beyond their own traditions, to see the beauty and the power in the beliefs and practices of others. You can tell that's part of my motivation for approaching the talk this way today. Now, I'm a philosopher, so I love the great medieval Islamic philosophers, but I've discovered that people fall asleep in 2 or 3 minutes. So I won't talk about wujud, the necessary, which is one in and of itself, and the contingent in itself, though if you are a practicing Muslim, you should be proud that such brilliant philosophy was done in the study of the Holy Quran by Muslims who knew the best of the literature from the ancient Greeks, from Christians and Jews, and who were able to bring, to me, some of the highest philosophies in the history of humanity to expression. But I'll fight off I'll resist that tendency. But I have to say something about Ibn Rushd, because this is a sentence, so written hundreds of years ago, that speaks to today. He said, we maintain that the business of philosophy is to look into creation and to ponder over it in order to be guided to the Creator. And he reminds Muslims and through them to the whole world that the law encourages and exhorts us to observe creation. The Holy Quran is filled with calls to move beyond ourselves and our own comfort and to live for the sake of the planet and all things in it. Let man consider, therefore, of what he is created. He is created of the seed poured forth, issuing from the loins and the breastbones. Do they not consider the camels, how they're created? The heaven, how it is raised? The mountains, how they are fixed? The earth, how it is extended? And the prophet calls humans to turn from the idols that they invoke and to recognize that those idols can never create a single fly, though they may all assemble for the purpose. As a way of life, Islam expects humans to respect the environment for at least 7 different reasons. And I want to pause and to just let the Quranic case for treating the world as a sacred creation from God, just to let that sound as something on which you can meditate, whether you yourself are Muslim or whether you are just learning to understand this great religious tradition and the role that it can play in the world today. First of all, Quran teaches that the environment is God's creation. Nature has a firm and well-knit structure with no gaps, no ruptures, no dislocations. Nature is the grand handiwork of the Almighty. It's like a mirror. It reflects the power and the beauty and the wisdom of its creation. And Quran teaches that every creature deserves attention and consideration because of its relation to the divine. There is nothing we see in this world that is not a direct or indirect creation of God. Nature didn't just happen. It was created for a purpose. So, in Holy Quran we read, "Not for idle sport did we create the heavens and the earth and all that is in between. If it had been our wish to take just a pastime, we should surely have taken it from the things nearest to us, if we would do such a thing." Nature, therefore, serves as a means to develop one's understanding of the Creator. And by protecting nature, Muslims and all persons preserve God's creatures who also pray and pray to Him. I want to draw from this beautiful book. Actually, I brought a copy. Let's see. And I have it here. You can look at, or I can hand it around the room. It's Islam and Ecology, right? Edited by Richard Fultz and others. And it has a great collection of resources. I'll draw from some of those in bringing these to you. So this is from Ibrahim Özdemir, and he argues that Muslims live in a world that is alive, meaningful, purposive, and more important, Muslim, like themselves, because everything in the universe behaves in accordance with God's laws. The universe even prostrates itself before God. Therefore, Muslims should seek to protect and preserve the environment, because by so doing, they protect God's creatures, which pray to Him and praise Him. In short, nature is sacred. There's a beautiful poem from a Muslim mystic that goes like this, Hasan Ali. "God, I love you, and whoever and whatever loves you. I've recognized that every creature loves you in a certain way. So I thought of loving every creature too, for each is your creation." Or, put more philosophically, the soundest basis of environmental ethics and responsibility in Islam is our own experience as humans of being integrated through connectedness with the divine and with nature. This theme is integral to the Quran and is affirmed in Islamic literature and poetry. You see, the irony is that while science can teach the facts about the universe, it cannot justify why we should care. It can tell us, if you do this, you will soil your own nest and find yourself in trouble. But Quran and the Muslim tradition teaches why those fundamental values should matter to us as creations of God. In other words, it teaches not just the valuable earth, but the sacred earth. Thus, human beings have a responsibility toward the environment. Perhaps you know the Go Green Muslim campaign, which is a campaign here in North America. Because nature was created for more than just humanity's use. As Özdemir writes elsewhere, even if humankind is the vice-regent of God on earth, it does not necessarily mean that the whole of nature and its resources are designed for humans' benefits only. Christianity has been particularly guilty in misunderstanding that fact. We took the story of the creation of the earth in Genesis and the placement of humans as the ones who named the animals, Adam names the animals, and cultivates the soil. The Christian theologians over the centuries, unfortunately, took that as a reason for us to use nature in whatever way we wish. And it built itself, largely through the Christian Europe, into secular treatments of the earth. So the national parks, the National Forest Service, and early environmental work in the United States were motivated by what? They were motivated by the teaching that these are natural resources. And so they are things for us to use, or not to use. But the dominant model was use management. The Quran does not teach that the world is just there for the use of humans, even if humans are the right vice regent of God. It teaches that they are there for their own value, for their own sake. Indigenous peoples teach this in the spiritualities of indigenous peoples around the earth. Buddhists and Hindus know this in their treatment of the value of all living things. But contemporary secular world doesn't make it a part of what it does. We're looking for a stewardship beyond this anthropocentrism. As Quran teaches, the earth, we have spread it out wide and placed on it mountains firm and caused life of every kind to grow on it in a balanced manner, provided means of livelihood for you as well as for all living beings whose sustenance does not depend on you. So my final point, justice and balance in Islam are understood as a universal law of God, that nature has been created with an order and balance. This is what environmentalists call the balance of an ecosystem, the symbiosis between all the different organisms in a particular setting. That working together is reflected here in this Islamic approach, Quranic perspective on environmental ethics. I would love to tell some of the stories many of you probably know about how the Prophet advocated moderate water use, even in cases where the water was being used to perform ablutions. And as you may know, the saying of the Prophet is yes. When you ask, can there be wastefulness in ablutions? He said, yes, even if you perform them on the bank of a rushing river. Do you understand? Water is inherently valuable. It's not just a means for your rightness with God. All resources are valuable in and of themselves. I'd like to close in a third and final way. I began listing some of the scientific facts and calling for a partnership between science and the religious traditions. Then I paused to hold up before you 7 key tenets of Islam to show how a Quranic environmental ethics is a powerful way to call human beings into rightness with creation. I could have done the same out of Christian or Jewish or Hindu or Buddhist tradition, and we'll do that in another talk. But I wanted you to see what powerful resources are available there. But you know, in the end, maybe most important are those words that seep below our conscious selves and draw us to an inner sense of our oneness with God and our connection with nature. And I'd like to close with some beautiful poetry, but here, to show you it's not a single tradition, I'd like to move back and forth between Christian and Islamic spirituality. Just sort of let it filter into your consciousness, maybe through a different part of your brain than that rational science part. And I think I'll just let these beautiful sayings speak for themselves. Begin with one from Shamastari, Muslim mystic. His famous book, you probably know, The Secret Rose. Each creature has its being from the one name, from which it comes forth, and to which it returns, with praises unwavering. Each creature. And from Rabia, famous Muslim woman mystic, my master, through you, the ones who loved you came to be near you. For your glory, the mighty whales have praised you in the vast ocean. For your sanctity and holiness, the waves have crashed. For you, the darkness of the night and the wheeling stars, the swelling sea, the shining moon, the bright planets, everything you have made in proportion, for you are God, the Almighty. Say this in honor of the full moon of last night, right? Did you stand outside and look at it? What a reminder. I hope the words of Rabia will sound in your ears. The Christian mystic, St. John of the Cross, is maybe well known to you. He wrote spiritual canticles, of which one goes this way. My beloved is the mountains, and lovely wooded valleys, strange islands and resounding rivers, the whistling of love-stirring breezes, the tranquil night at the time of the rising dawn, silent music, sounding solitude, the supper that refreshes and deepens love. Perhaps my favorite of all, Rumi. Wake up with the morning breeze and ask for a change. Open and fill yourself with the wine that is your life. Give me your excitement, but let it ground me so I don't wobble. Watch the ripples on the surface. Then launch me like a ship. Once I was only a piece of wood. Moses threw me down, and now I'm a powerful dragon. I was dead. Jesus raised me. Muhammad spoke, and this tree shimmered. Say the word again, Shams, so we can feel you. Your light within everything. And I want to give a woman the last word, so I close with, my wife talking. I close with, again, a beautiful poem from the mystic Rabbi. Oops, where is she? I'm going to just read it into you. My master, through you, the ones who loved you came to be near you. For your glory, the mighty whales, I read this before. For your sanctity and holiness, the waves. For you, the darkness of the night and the wheeling stars, the swelling sea, the shining moon, the bright planets, everything you have made in proportion. For you are God, the Almighty. I suggest, ladies and gentlemen, that we have here a natural unity between a spirituality that imbibes within us all, which expresses itself in poetry, in mystical literature, in the language of prayer, in the silent sense of connection with the world in which we exist and that exists around us. I suggest that you cannot open your eyes and your ears and the pores of your skin as you walk through a redwood forest, as you walk on a beach at sunset, as you walk in the hills that surround Los Angeles, without recognizing that you are a child of this universe, that you share your origins with that same one who brought us here. And I suggest that it offers where the language and the facts of science fall short, where they fail to motivate our hearts. I suggest that this belief, this experience, and this praxis open up a path of connection. That we truly are meant to be here. That when we take in our hands our calling and our purpose and our fate, we are powerful enough to stop this bleeding of nature and to become part of its redemption again. Thank you very much, Ryan.